Okay, everybody, welcome to the latest episode of All2ReelToo. My name is Michael E. Cullen II, and with me, as always, is...
And it's Sesame, I'm sorry that I'm sometimes sarcastic, and Carta.
That's a long name.
It is probably one of my longest ones so far.
Yes. Is that all one word? Like
the middle
together?
name, it's all one word, yeah.
Oh, okay. Just checking.
Yeah.
Did we figure out if they charge you by the letter or the syllable or what?
It's by the letter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know where you're getting all this money, man.
I don't know either. It's just like a pot of gold that shows up and then...
You change your name every week, I mean...
But I can only use it for that purpose. So...
That kind of sucks.
One time I tried to spend it on something else and it just disappeared. So it's like it's money only for that thing.
Does it work for like gas money to get there to change your name or...
No, not really. Sometimes I've had to walk.
Or can you do this online?
I don't know because I've never actually really done it. So.
Oh, okay. So this is all just a bit?
Yeah, it's all. I mean, come on, my whole life is a bit. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just checking. I was believing you every one of these weeks.
I'm sorry, man. For the past 2 years, I've been...
You've been lying to me.
3 years at this point. And when did I change my name to Sesame? I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago.
I don't know. I think it was like a year and a half or 2 years ago. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name really is not really Sesame and Carta, although, which is like hilarious because like probably like confusing Scott because you tell him. By the way, Scott's one of the
guests we have on today. Yeah,
you told them on the group chat. I'm tagging Matt in here, a.k.a. Alan Majeski, a.k.a. Sesame.
Yeah.
What the hell? Like,
at least I didn't have to go over every name you use every week.
Yeah.
The middle names and all.
Now I let my Facebook name out. Now everyone's going to know who I am. Okay, who cares?
That's okay.
It doesn't matter.
It's not that one. It's the other one. So don't look him up. You know, if you find...
It doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly. It could be one of 4 or 5 or...
It's a common name. Yeah, so today on the show, we had an all-two interview with Shawn Justice and Scott Galbraith, the writers and then the director and the star of the film The Reconciler that we saw recently. So, yes, Scott is one of the co-writers and the star of the movie. And then we also had Shawn Justice, who was one of the co-writers and director of the film. Talked to, nice little talk we had with them. Covered everything from why they made the film to, the, Roddy Piper of it all and everything, So it's a good interview. Please listen because I think it's actually one of our best interviews we've done. So.
Yeah, it is, and it's it's very you could tell they've kind of probably done this before. They're very comfortable, at being interviewed by people. Very very sincere vibe I got from them, from their friendship and their collaboration relationship as well.
And they were very gracious to come on the show after we kind of made fun of their film a little bit. Like we do, but not like, I don't think we eviscerated this one as much as we do some other ones. So,
no, well, and like I mentioned too, is like, when I do this, I'm kind of exaggerating a little bit. Like,
yeah, you're playing a character.
It's like a kind of a character, but it's still me. It's not really meant to be, taken personally or meant in bad faith. So if I do actually for real offend someone, then I actually will apologize because for me, I'm not really the business of like trying to hurt people's feelings. Like it's not, like, I don't want to be that kind of person, you know?
Yeah. And I
So,
mean, and if anybody else that, we've talked about your film and would like to come on, we'd be more than happy to have you on and talk about your filmmaking process and, just the whole thing and how just the pain it is to make a film and the joy of it too, So, yeah. But I guess without further ado, here's our interview with Scott and Shawn here. So check it out. I'd like to thank Shawn Justice and Scott Galbraith for joining us today on All2ReelToo to talk about their life in film, especially the film The Reconciler, which we covered in a previous episode here. First off, I just wanted to ask you guys how you got started in filmmaking.
Oh, for me, I could start. My dad was a amateur kind of filmmaker. He was an electrical contractor by trade, but he ended up loving media. He was a DJ back in the 50s and did dances and that kind of thing. And he always loved film and audio, reel to reel, and at church, he did all the sound. I remember growing up being in the sound booth with him. And back then it was pretty archaic compared to what it is now.
Yeah.
But he had a Super 8 camera. He had his little editor, and he even had the sound recorder from Elmo, and had a little Canon, camera. And one of the things that he did with us and my twin brother is we would animate our Legos and our toys.
Oh, nice.
And it was kind of that bonding experience, between father and sons that, is really good to have when you're young. So as my dad progressed through, buying he was one of the first in town to own a Betamax, if anybody even knows what that is. And, he had the portable, consumer recorders where you had, the snake from the camera to the pack, recording that way. And so we kind of grew up around it. And then in the 7th grade, my brother and I had the opportunity to take a television production class in our middle school. And we, in the Portland area, had a performing arts high school that we excelled very well because we kind of knew filmmaking anyway in that 7th grade class. We're asked at the end of our 7th grade year to be advanced placement students at this performing arts high school, and they called Jefferson Performing Arts, and we excelled there. And we were doing videos for companies and such by the time we were 16, and had our own music video show. And then he went off to college. I stayed in Portland went to Portland State for business, but started my own production company when I was 19, and I was doing corporate and commercial work since 1989. So I've been at it almost 34 years now.
Oh, wow. How about you, Scott?
Well, it's funny that you should use the term filmmaker because I'm not really a filmmaker. I consider myself a ham or an entertainer. One of the reasons why people like Shawn have a job is because not everybody can do. I know for a fact that I'm not a film director.
Oh, yeah.
When I was younger, I wanted to do everything. And while I am a jack of a couple trades, you learn pretty quickly you can't do everything. And there's just stuff with directing and such that I couldn't, like, for example, I never could have directed a film myself. And, but how I got into performing and writing is kind of just, I started, as your counterpart mentioned on the review of The Reconciler, I'm a magician. Thank you very much for bringing that up, Mr. Is it Sesame? Is that your name, sir?
yes.
Yes, okay, yes. I wanted to make sure I used the right name here. Yeah.
Thank you.
You brought up that I was a magician. Been a magician since I was 6. And saw my first David Copperfield, had a Fisher-Price membership shortly thereafter. And kind of wanting to act in school plays and church plays and stuff like that. In fact, if we want to talk about The Reconciler the Reconciler was a church play first. And there's some interesting things to mention there, but we'll get into that in just a minute. But anyway, I just have always had an overactive imagination. And one of the things that I just can't seem to do is stay out of my own work, because part of getting excited about the very first thing I ever wrote was a church skit when I was 13 for a drama festival that my church was participating in. And I literally hated every single church skit that was in the church library, because it was all person one talking to person two about whatever spiritual concept the writer wanted to convey. And I went to my youth pastor. His name was James. He was only my youth pastor for 2 years, but he did something that changed the course of my life. I said to him, I don't like any of this stuff. There's no creativity in it. It's just regular people talking to each other. Where's the imagination? And he literally looked at me and said, well, Scott, if you don't like it, then you write something you want to be in. So I don't know how to write something I don't want to be in. That basically
That's good
is
advice.
one of the reasons why I always end up in my own. Now, one thing that I have thankfully gotten away from is always making myself the star. One thing I learned from Reconciler was, after I was exhausted after our 11 days of shooting, was, yeah, I'm not a leading man. I think my drama teacher in high school had it right when she cast me as the character actor. I think I'm more character actor. And I kind of have a more character actor role in Shawn's other film, The Murder of Innocence, which he was nice enough to put me in when he was hired to write that. So I hope that answers your question about how I got into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good advice with for writing in general. You know, even if you're not going to be in it, you still put yourself in the story. You know, it might be there might be like an avatar for you as one of the characters in there. I think that's a good way to look at it, because most writers, they say write what you know. So, it's like,
How many of his own films has Quentin Tarantino been in?
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is even if he's not in the movie, the other characters are parts of him. So, yeah, it's the same thing.
Well, I was in Reconciler, actually. Do you remember that?
Which part did you do in Reconciler? Like, because it's been like over a month since I've seen it, and I've seen so much since then.
Yeah. I bet you're wondering why you're here in this car.
Oh, okay.
I was actually reading the lines on set when we shot that, but he did the ADR for the voice.
Nice.
So I did the voice, but it was heavily, synthesized. So
right, yeah.
The one scene in the movie that we get accused of blatantly ripping off Saw, and for the record, the movie was not a Saw ripoff. Just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
Is that we did not rip off Saw. I came up with the idea before I ever saw Saw. That's the thing I hate about the movie Saw. You can't talk about it without saying the word seesaw or something like that, like you guys very much proved during your first podcast.
Yeah. I remember back when the first Saw movie came out, and I was working at a video store, and everybody was like, "Hey, Mike, did you see Saw yet?" And I'm like, "On the playground? Like, what are you talking about?" No. I understand that. I mean, there's a lot of parallel thinking in filmmaking in general. I mean, for every Armageddon, there's a Deep Impact. It's like things happen like that.
Yeah. Like we mentioned before, I'm surprised that Saw has never been accused of ripping off Cube.
Yeah,
which is another movie where people wake up having no idea how they got there. I basically have this rule: if more than 2 movies have done it, it's a trope. It's not an original idea. Yeah. So it's just doing your own. I mean, how many times has the Die Hard formula been redone?
Mm-hmm.
So,
and they say there's only like a handful of stories, anyways, that are just told in slightly different ways. Yeah. So
But in all honesty, I had never seen the movie Saw when I first came up with the idea, and everybody who's criticizing this thing now is saying these are 2 Christian filmmakers who just blatantly ripped off Saw. We didn't, just for the record. That's the one thing I want to set straight. We did not blatantly rip off Saw.
Did you have something to say there, Sesame?
Yeah, we knew that. It was just a marketing thing, because I read all. I mean, like, after I watched it, I'm like, okay, there's no gore, there's no torture, there's no, it's like totally different thing. But yeah, it was just like a snarky marketing thing that's a weird phrase.
I don't know. I have the licensing contract right here, guys. I don't know what you're talking about.
Sorry, go ahead.
One other thing that I should mention is that some other people were calling it like, one of the people who did a critique of it said, it's really hard for Christians to make horror movies. Well, if you're looking through it through that lens, you're not going to like the movie, because Shawn and I, we never called it a horror movie.
Yeah,
we considered it a suspense or a mystery. Horror movies have a lot of, as you said, gore. If there's no gore, I don't think it's a horror movie. At least that's my philosophy.
It just depends on the way you're looking at it. And I didn't really look at it as a horror film after I saw it. I mean, and all I had seen is like one article where somebody said something about, oh, it's a Christian version of Saw. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go into this with this frame of mind. And then got something completely different. So
I mean, I pretty much knew it wasn't just from, I don't know, just because I'm cynical. Whenever I read something like that, I'm like, this is someone obviously just trying to play it up, you know. But I just wanted to mention really quick, because I was listening to a interview of yours, Scott, recently, and you said something really interesting about how about not making your own creativity like an idol, basically, like, or something like that. And I thought that was really interesting.
Because it can happen. Yeah, it can if you're not careful. One of the I think Shawn will back this up. You know, Shawn and I, we're not shy about the fact that we're both Christian men. We both believe in the Bible. And sometimes if you fall in love with an idea that you just want to make so badly, I mean, as a matter of fact, Shawn and I have been trying to make another movie for 13 years. That I have just at the time, he will attest to the fact that I have become obsessed over time. It's the one that brought us together in the first place. And then, of course, we wound up making Reconciler first. But you can, and this is something I've talked with my pastors about, which is sometimes if you're not careful, the idea can become what you're worshiping instead of God himself, if you're not careful. So, and I have fallen into that trap. Yeah. Contrary to what other Christians will tell you, we are not perfect.
Nobody is. You know, that's the thing, you know, no human is. I mean, it's just.
Oh, before I forget, Mr. Sesman, I just have to say this right now. Yes, Shawn Justice is his real name. That was one thing during the original podcast. I just had to say.
I was hoping so, because that's such a cool name, and
it's too perfect of a name. I've come across those, like I said, I used to work at a video store, and there'd be customers who came in, and I'd actually ask some of them, I'd be like, can I write down your name and use it in a movie in the future? Because you sound like you'd be a good, like, police detective name or something, you know, whatever they had, you know. So yeah, some names like that are cool. Yeah. And Justice is just a cool last name. So you can almost put anything in front of it.
He actually wrote a movie called Justice.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. Well, actually, it made into a movie. It was on Netflix for a long time. So,
oh, really?
Stephen. I just blanked out.
He does that a lot.
My brain's all over the place. Stephen Lang. Plays the corrupt mayor in it. So
yeah, Stephen Lang's a great actor. Yeah. The other question I had. Well, we can dive in right now to I know you've done other things before and since the Reconciler, but how did you guys come up with the concept of the Reconciler to begin with?
Well, actually, that's kind of interesting. Believe it or not, I've said repeatedly in this interview already, I did not rip off Saw.
Uh-huh.
The original idea actually came from a very unusual place. The 1990s sitcom Perfect Strangers. Have you guys ever seen that?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah, okay. Definitely.
There was an episode where Larry would not talk to Balky because he lent someone his car without asking him. So Balky gets a pair of handcuffs from a security guard and handcuffs himself to Larry until he starts talking to him. And then they break the key when they're trying to unlock themselves, and they have to spend the rest of the episode locked to each other. A later episode was done where the girls were fighting, and Larry and Balky orchestrated this plan to lock them all in the apartment until they talked. And just at some point I said, you know, you could almost do a movie or a series about a guy who did, because I see a lot of people, unfortunately, even in my church, who just hold grudges for stupid reasons. And actually, believe it or not, one of the other people who critiqued the movie said that people would not hold on to grudge. Someone actually said that the reasons for people not getting along in this movie were actually too petty. Well, that was kind of the point. The idea that God wouldn't do this to somebody because, you know, you guys gave away the ending already. The Reconciler is God. God wouldn't do this to two people who have a problem that need a lot of healing. Like, for example, God would never put the parent of a murder victim and the guy who committed the crime in a room together to heal. That would not be a smart.
Yeah, because
the people that the Reconciler, the people that the Reconciler program happens to are the people who are being stupid and petty for dumb reasons. So that's the reason why, it's something as simple as, actually the conversation between the two twins. Actually, I should back up here just a little bit. I want to let you guys know something kind of interesting about the movie. The way it basically happened is that I had this idea based on what I had seen on, Perfect Strangers to do this scenario. And I started writing it, and then I abandoned it for a while. And then I had a time to go back and do a play for my church during the summer. And so I decided to dust this one off. I was telling somebody about it, and they said, Scott, this sounds an awful lot like the movie Saw. Have you seen it? And I'm like, no. And they're like, you should watch it before you write any further. So I watched it, and I was convinced of three things. Number one, the film was so gory and so different from my film that nobody would accuse me of ripping it off.
Yeah.
Number two, no one in my church would ever see the movie. And three, I didn't think this thing would go any further than a church play. So I thought that's okay. We'll never run into that problem. Now, one thing that's also worth mentioning is my original play was only 45 minutes long. I remember that one of you said during your podcast that you felt like the reporter storyline was kind of added in. Well, there's a reason for that. When we couldn't get the Reconciler story up to 60 minutes, Shawn here put his genius thinking cap on and literally wrote that storyline 1 week before we started filming because our other producer would not accept a script that was not feature length.
Oh, wow.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, but another interesting tidbit, I played Ed in the original play, but in the original play, Ed is actually stuck with a mother and a daughter, not twin brothers.
Oh, okay.
And now there's a reason for that change. It's because when you're doing an independent film, sometimes it's cheaper to write around what you have than it is to do a casting call and not find the right people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy and Jordan Steele, who played Alex and James, whose characters were originally Laurie and Allison. We used the Laurie name in the reporter storyline. That is like that's one of my only two contributions to the reporter storyline that Shawn wrote. And basically, we had been wanting to use Jeremy and Jordan in another project, the 13-year project, but they needed to be of a certain age, and they were starting to age out the roles, and it was looking less and less like we were going to be able to use them for that movie. So I said to Shawn, do we want to do a casting call and hope we find the mother and a daughter that I had chemistry with, or do we want to semi-make good on our promise with Jeremy and Jordan and rewrite the script with them? And the latter turned out to be the cheaper and more better move because we had to shoot all that warehouse stuff in only 3 days.
Those are another couple guys that have great names. Steele is
Yes.
the last name. That's a good one too.
Yes.
How question here, how did Roddy Piper get involved in the project? I'm just curious about that.
I'll pass that one to you, Shawn, because I didn't actually meet him at all.
Right. Well, actually, Roddy lived in the Portland area.
Oh, wow.
And I had worked with him on another a pilot for a wrestling show, believe it or not. That he and I got to be good friends on. He, for some reason, asked me to be his personal cameraman on that show, on that pilot. And so we spent a lot of time together, one-on-one. And I think I do know why, because I don't know. I told them a little bit of the story of my son's passing about 11 years ago when it happened. And that actually is a whole own story of how Reconciler got made. But we were talking and we were talking about our children. And, I said that I had one that passed away. And this was probably within 6 months of that happening that I got working on that show. And he was just like very, I remember, I don't know, Roddy had these just these hands that were, you're like, okay, this is Roddy Piper. And he like puts his hand on my, on the side of my face. He comes up to me and he gets real close and he's like, I'm so sorry, Shawn. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, whoa, this is like Roddy Piper,
Yeah.
In my face, comforting me. And I was just so moved by his compassion. And we just stayed in touch. And when it came time to, I thought when I got the script, because what happened is when there was a settlement, there was some wrongful death, and some of the decisions that were made due to what happened, with my son, and we wanted to invest in projects. And I said, why don't we just do something small to begin with? And I know
And at the time, I was doing the Reconciler play.
right. And Scott, I was doing the Reconciler plan. I go, that's kind of an interesting idea. Why don't we just, get together a small group of people and go make it? I mean, it's an indie film. It was just kind of get my feet wet. I hadn't made a film in 12, 13 years. My first feature I did was called Going the Distance, and it was a teen film about these guys who are in bands and stuff. And I then kept doing corporate work, and that was my bread and butter. And always had the passion, though, kind of on, I want to call on the side, but, to do narrative stuff. And the education I had at the Performing Arts School was more news-oriented, feature-oriented, and I didn't go to film school, so it was kind of self-taught on the narrative side, and it's kind of cutting my teeth on stuff. And the play, that's how the Reconciler came about into a movie, is I was just like, hey, what if we did this? And so I wrote the script into, I've adapted it for the screen, and then found out that we were short, 62 pages or something like that.
Right.
And we're just like right before shooting, and we're trying to get it into a feature length sales channel. And so we already had some deals going on. We had, I think E1 was interested in distributing it. And so we're like, oh, shoot, what do we do? Do we create more of these scenes where people are being reconciled? And I just felt like it was too much to do more than 3, subplots. And so, or three stories. So I said, well, what if I wrote something real quick and I knew Sherry Morris, who played the female reporter in it.
Arguably the second biggest name in the movie. She's a big name on the Christian film market. She did a movie called The Book of Ruth that was very popular. She played Ruth.
Yeah. I looked her up on IMDb and saw that she'd have a extensive,
she's done a few things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I became friends with her, and it's like, well, let me think. And it was, so that whole subplot of weaving that in with her story, it was a little odd, but I was like, what else are we going to do in such a short amount of time? And so I literally wrote a part in for Roddy, and I said, hey, Roddy, would you be interested in coming in and working on this project? And, he shot it a day. Working with him was very interesting. He did not stick to script, and he was very, I love the guy. He had such a big heart, but as an actor, as a director working with him, you're just like, what's he doing? You're looking at the script going, and I'd be like, Roddy, it says this. And he's like, yeah, I gotcha. And you're like, was he agreeing with me? What can someone give me a Roddy interpreter here?
Is he just placating you or what?
Yeah, I know. He was just all over the place. So it was pretty funny. But we ended up, I thought, well, we'll just we'll fix some stuff in ADR and that. And, before we could, he passed away.
Oh, geez.
And so, and there was our audio guy, bless his heart. He tried his best, but, being a low budget indie film, it was his first experience. And where he placed the microphone on Roddy was very odd. And so, but I wasn't gonna, now looking back, of course, I should have said, cut, let's replace the microphone. But Roddy was in such, he wasn't like a method actor, but, you didn't necessarily want to stop and say, hey, we screwed up on audio, so let's replace the microphone. So there's some garbliness to this day. I ran it through a bunch of processors and best we could. But yeah, there's, in an indie film, there's so much that, people, their expectation is that you're going to be, $100 million quality film as opposed to an indie film, right?
Yeah.
And,
I think we can say that on paper, this film was at a budget of about, $50,000, Shawn?
It was, yeah. Well, out of pocket. I didn't pay myself, of course, and
Yeah.
you know, well, a lot of people gave in, but we still, we spent money on, a lot of things, and I paid a lot of the extra crew, the audio guys, and that kind of thing, and so, but yeah, I mean, it was it's considered ultra low budget by SAG standards.
Yeah.
But
I've
we had
done-
a blast.
I've done 2 features that cost us like $7,000 each, so
Right.
like way low budget. But I mean, and I understand the whole thing with trying to deal with an actor you only have for like a day or a weekend or something like that. Because when my first feature, we had R.E. Lehman from the original Nightmare. Friday the 13th. He played the original Jason Voorhees. We had him for one day, and we had 2 or 3 scenes with him, and we had to shoot them all in that time. And then one of his co-stars didn't really do his lines that great in the scene with him. So then 3 months later, we shot the other side of the conversation. So we had to.
You see that a lot in independent films, particularly in Christian independent films, where they will like Pureflix made this movie called Jerusalem Countdown. And on the cover, they have like all 5 big names as heads, like Christian movies like to do. The floating heads thing. And one of the 5 people was Lee Majors from the Fall Guy and the $6 Million Man. He dies in the first scene he's in.
Yeah.
He's only so there's always somebody who they like throw in for just so. I call them a poster actor. Basically somebody you find someone, and that's what Roddy was for this film. One thing that I should mention that's just real quickly as far as the writing process between me and Shawn is because I had literally buck kiss for ideas on how to expand the script. That's one of the reasons why I said, Shawn, whatever you want to add to it, go right ahead. And he sent me, the original idea was to end the film. Shawn's original idea was to have the film end with Laurie interviewing the twins about their encounter with me, the angel.
Yeah.
But then I get the script and he goes, he sends it to me, he goes, good news, it's long enough. I read it and that ending's not in there. And I go, Shawn, where is it? And he goes, well, it felt kind of forced. And I'm like, okay, now we have a long enough script, but we have 2 storylines with no connection at all. And we were racking our brains trying to figure out the connection. And literally at 1:30 in the morning one night, a light bulb goes off and I say, hey, Shawn, we've been trying to connect the reporter directly to the guys in the warehouse. What if we connected them indirectly? That scene where you have Laurie come home and she prays by herself. What if she runs into Jeff and JR and it turns out she's their mother / wife? And he goes, you know what? I was thinking we needed one more scene with Jeff and JR after the mountain. That would actually work. So we say that little snippet right there where she comes home and sees them. That what we call that, or at least I do. I call that the 30-second scene that solved 3 problems. It tells us why Laurie is the way she is. It tells us what her connection is to the rest of the story, and it connects the stories at the same time. So,
right. But that part kind of confused me. So does she know that the 2 of them were like had this whole situation with the Reconciler, or did they keep that?
Well, yeah, that's another thing, believe it or not, that for some strange reason people can't. You do realize that the soldier and his son and the cops are stories that I'm telling.
Okay.
And this is something that I've run into, and I've talked to Shawn about it as well. I feel like the Christian audience for Christian films is a little bit not too bright because they stay away from modern films, which are shot like non-linearly and are kind of like mind puzzles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They don't get the concept of out of order stuff. And so I surmise that The Soldier and His Son was like 2 years ago.
Okay.
But Laurie and me and the twins in the warehouse, that's present day. The Soldier and His Son is like 2 years ago, and the cops were like 1 year ago. I would have people who say, well, Scott, the message is very good, but how does that one cop go from being in the car to being outside the car to being back in the car again? And I'm like, because the stuff in the car is not in present day. It's a flashback. You know what I mean? I begged Shawn to put 1 year ago, 2 years ago at the bottom of the screen, but he goes, no, I don't want to insult the audience's intelligence. And I'm like, the audience who's going to watch this is too stupid.
I know, and I'm guilty of that.
And I wouldn't say that just about a Christian audience, because there's a lot of like your general normal audience that if you
my
do,
own
do
mother
something, you
didn't
know,
get it. I had to
because I
explain
mean,
it to my
I know
mother.
people like when Lost was on that couldn't understand the flashbacks and that. So, you know,
Right.
so yeah.
Like Sean and I have actually written a Christian film that kind of takes a few cues from the show This Is Us, which is another movie we hope to make at some point.
Yeah, you know, I've my co-producer at the time on Reconciler, I had helped him with a couple of his other little indie films, in writing and taking some of his ideas and putting them into story form. And he was always like, you got to treat your audience like they're in the third grade. and you know, I understand that, and that's kind of what was going on, but I've always kind of, I don't want to say refused to do that, and been like, well, you know, if people are going to get it, they're going to get it, and if they're not, they're not. And the people that do get it, it's kind of a reward, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
or
I don't know what I just did, but we'll go with it.
It worked. It worked. Yeah. No, I agree with that totally, Sean. One of the things, in the years I've been a magician, I never do what I call Mr. Rogers magic shows, because kids are a lot smarter than people give them credit for.
That's
And
what
one
I
thing
think,
that I will
too.
what'd you say?
That's what I think too. But
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. One thing that people will always ask me is they'll be like, "What do you have a mixed crowd of older kids or younger kids? Who do you gear the thing at?" And I'm like, I gear the audience at the older crowd, because it's easier to ask the younger crowd to come up to the older kids' levels than it is to say to all the older kids, "Okay, we're going to be singing the ABCs, try to be at the younger kids' levels," because they'll be like all bratty and be like, "No, I don't want to do this stuff." So I gear it at families. Have always been my best audience for that reason. So anyway, just a little thing there.
Yeah, I mean, you got to kind of
Right.
cover all of it. I mean, like the best TV shows or movies out there kind of cater to everyone and not
Right.
just, you know, niche markets. Not that there's anything wrong with that either, because, you know, sometimes people just want to watch a horror movie or a comedy or, you know, or an adult comedy or a kids comedy or an animated movie, whatever, you know, it's just the way it is. Any questions, Sesame?
Not so much a question, but just more of a clarification. So, you know, sometimes I rag on movies, and it's more of like a exaggeration thing, because I'm very cognizant of how much work goes into like any kind of project, right? So I really hope I didn't offend you guys by just blasting it, because it was more of just kind of my style, basically. It's not personal. It's nothing like that, you know, because you know, I do music and stuff like that, and I know like how many hours go into like just a single song or whatever. And you know, they have some jerk be like, "Oh well, they didn't, you know, put it in this part or whatever."
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, we didn't take it personally. You guys were, I think, one of the better ones. That did some of the other one. I'm not going to mention the names here, but there are some other reviewers that were just there. There's one YouTube channel, I'm not going to mention the name, that devotes their entire channel to ripping apart Christian films. And you couldn't do anything better with your time than that. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a personal vendetta channel.
Yeah, I mean,
you guys,
like we started out with, we had a different podcast where it was just covering films based on true stories.
right?
But then we realized that limited us. So what we do with our podcast is we'll cover a TV pilot that didn't last more than a season, for a show that didn't last more than a season. We'll cover a movie in one genre, then we'll cover like the new Marvel movie in theaters. We'll do that. We just want to kind of have a variety of what we can cover, so we're not pigeonholed. I mean, it's kind of hurt us in a way, because I looked at some of the other stuff you guys did critiques for, and I was amazed you found our film, to be honest with you. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. We search YouTube a lot and find a lot of these movies and TV shows that it'll just come up, I think, because we've looked for other ones, and I'll be like, hey, that looks interesting. So yeah, and I know Sesame found this one. I don't even know how you found it. How'd you find this, Sesame?
I was just searching for like religious films or something like that, and then that was one of the ones that came up, and just checked it out, you know, read a little about it. Yeah, I read the whole thing about the Christian version of Saul. I'm like, even then I was like, I I don't think that's what it is. That's a marketing thing that, not saying you market it that way, but that's a marketing thing that someone who wrote the article, who wanted people to go to the website and read the article, did. And so I was like, okay, whatever. So yeah, that was just kind of that was just my motivation or whatever. I just typed in religious films on YouTube and just see whatever popped up.
Marketing would suggest that we actually got a good distribution deal when this thing was first made.
Right. Well, that's the other thing that I was gonna bring up and I forgot. So because I watched Lucifer and the Father recently, and then I watched an interview about it with I forgot the name of the YouTube channel, but it was with a woman. I forgot her name.
Maggie Cavler.
Yeah, and you said something too about crowdfunding, which again I thought was interesting because it does kind of touch on the psychology of individuals, where if you say something like, I need, $5,000 or whatever to make this film or this project or whatever, each person is sitting there thinking they want me personally to give them $5,000. And it's like, no, it's for everyone.
I've had to explain that. Sean and I have had to explain that to so many people when doing. I mean, one of the things that I use, like I actually finally should be mentioned, I just did a Lucifer and the Father screening last night at a church that had like 16 people in it, and we got a lot of people to donate to it. But I said to them, let me stress something in front of you all here, okay? We're trying to raise $600,000 to make the 5 additional episodes of Lucifer and the Father. Now, some people will look at that and they will go, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have that kind of money anywhere near it, but I will pray for you. Well, it's called crowdfunding for a reason, because we are not looking for one person to give us $600,000. You want to know what happens when one person gives you all that money? They have way too much power, and then they start to dictate changes in your story, and they're not usually a person who knows how to write. I'm sure Sean could tell stories about that, but I won't make it.
Yeah, so entitled. It's an entitlement.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, a lot of people are like that too. They're like, "Oh, my $5, $10, $100 or whatever isn't going to help."
Right.
But if you get 100 people donating $100, you get 1,000.
Yeah.
It's like,
and
you get $10,000. Yeah. So
a lot of people will say it's a lot of money. I don't think that'll work. But here's a story that I always tell to a crowd, and it always ends up making people give, believe it or not. I don't want to say it's a trick, but it's just really making them do them. My dad's a financial planner, and my mom was born and raised in Boston, so she's a diehard New England Patriots fan. So I said, okay, I'm going to combine my dad's financial expertise with the Patriots and give everybody an analogy here. There's a place called Gillette Stadium. Gillette Stadium fits 68,300 people. All of who are willing to go there drop a whole bunch of money on seeing guys fight over a football and drop even more money on beer, hot dogs, and whatever else they want to eat. If Sean and I found a way to fill Gillette Stadium and everybody gave us $10, we would have more than we needed to make this series.
Yeah.
So I find it hard to believe that out there in these information superhighway social network, we can't find that.
It's
that's what we're trying to do.
It's amazing. Like I've got like thousands of friends on Facebook, and I've tried to do crowdfunding for me or help other people with crowdfunding. And you think with that many of friends that people would donate, but I think most of the people are thinking, well, I'm not going to donate, but I'm sure, these 5 other people will, they don't.
I'm sure someone else will do the right thing. That's kind of the right there.
The one thing I want to ask Dallas Jenkins, who's the mastermind behind the Christian series The Chosen, which is totally crowdfunded. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records. It's the most successful crowdfunded project in history.
Yeah.
What I want to ask him is, what did you do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What did you do? Because I'm amazed, to be honest with you, that we found $5,000 to make Lucifer and the Father. Lucifer and the Father was a $5,000 movie, totally crowdfunded on Indiegogo. And we had we thought we were going to have to make it for $1,000 less, but we had a 11th hour, very generous person who has asked me not to reveal his identity, who put up the last 1,000 we needed. So that's how that got done. So,
well, that's good. Yeah, I got another question for you. What what films and entertainment in general have inspired you guys before you got into filmmaking, or as you're doing filmmaking, or as you're doing your craft in any way? Films or TV shows or anything.
John, you can go first.
Yeah. Well, I think, I'm in my early 50s now, and, a lot of guys my age will go, Star Wars. But
Yeah.
I think for me, it was Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
Because I was 12 or 13 when it came out, or remember it. And it was just kind of when I was really kind of personally just kind of exploring and growing in my faith as a kid. And I remember seeing that and going, just being impressed with how in a mainstream film they showed, I mean, for lack of a better term, the character of God.
Yeah.
There was this element, and I was like, wow, that is really cool, because of me growing in my faith at that time, to see that on screen. And so for me, I worked on mainstream films and crazy other little indie films, and that's just a job, to me. But, and the other thing about the faith audience, for what you'll find is a lot of people on the faith side, they really like Reconciler because of the values and the affirmations that it has for their faith. And so, I'm not saying they're less critical, but certain things matter more to them, to have in a story or on screen. And it's not bad. It's just, I mean, it's you think of the gay and lesbian market. There's, people that are of that, they like those kinds of films more, right? Because it espouses and has, their values and what they're interested in seeing.
Well,
on
that's the thing.
screen.
People want to be represented in any way.
That's right.
And see
So,
themselves in a movie or TV show. Yeah,
that's right. So I don't make any apologies for, what we did in the Reconciler and why, certain films in the faith market, to someone who's outside of that might be like, oh, this is just propaganda or religious film or whatever. And, that's fine. Each people, my buddy, he loves horror films, right? And I'm like, not mine. It doesn't let my house full, but they keep making them, right? And there's people who absolutely hate horror films. I'm not a fan, but they don't interest me. And that's the cool thing about the, what do they call, the equalization of the technology, where a lot of people like me and like you guys can go out and make films, right? For $7,000, like you said.
Yeah.
And have fun doing it. And you have a little audience, and I think there's this misnomer that we're making, $100 million, super high quality films. And we're not. We're just out having fun. And maybe I spent, $50,000 out of pocket to make Reconciler, and we made some money on it. I'm not going to lie about that, but it hit a certain market, and we knew that going into it. And if there's, other people that want to come in that's not, something that they're interested in, and they critique it, that's fine. We just know the target market that we're trying to hit with it.
Yeah, and there's room for everything. That's the thing.
That's right.
Now,
that's
like you said, with the equalization of equipment, things being so much cheaper, like, just 10 years ago, it would have cost, probably.
And there is another
probably
name
twice
for
or
it.
try times as
Equalization,
much.
You're kind of leveling the playing field, kind of thing for people to go out and go have fun.
Yeah, make a movie on your iPhone or whatever, and with your friends in your backyard or whatever.
Well, the funny thing is, a lot of Christian films these days are shot on iPhones and stuff, and
they got good cameras.
On the rare occasion that the picture quality has been critiqued in Reconciler, which is very rare. I'm like, for the record, we shot that thing on the high definition red camera, which is the same camera that The Shield and the Show 24 were both shot on. So if there's one thing we didn't lack in, it's technology. So we shot Lucifer and the Father in that as well.
From a filmmaker standpoint, did you guys own one or rent one? Just out of curiosity.
I had this amazing government contract to do a bunch of training videos, and at the end of 2012 or 2011, I think, and they were dragging their feet, and I got this call from my client at the end of towards the end of December, and they're like, I got to pay you the rest of the, tens of thousands of dollars on this contract to you, or else I'm going to lose it and we're not done. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, because you're kind of anticipating what your taxes are going to be in your business. And then all of a sudden that's going to put me in the next tax bracket. And like, okay, I'm going to buy a camera. So I bought it and used it for my corporate work. And that's my bread and butter. But I was always like, I want to use it for film sometime. I want to. Yeah. So I owned one.
That's cool. Yeah. I know some people that have them. I've yet to use one myself. I shot my films on Canon DSLRs. I mean, so it's like, it is what it is.
I've done several music videos on those. They're great.
Did you want me to tell you what movies inspired me?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, no, it's okay. I've cut everybody in this podcast off at least once. So believe me, it's not.
Yeah.
For me, it's hard to say what movies inspired me, but I have never liked movies that make me depressed, make me sad, or just have no substance. I like thinking movies. And in some ways, I also kind of like, as a magician, I like one of my favorite movies is The Sting, without a doubt, because that movie is basically a magic trick, in my opinion. And I wanted to do something. Shawn was talking about how people like The Reconciler because of the substance and stuff like that. Well, let me tell you something interesting about people who like church plays or like Christian movies. They tend to like it for the message because they are Christians, and that's why everybody else gawks at it. And the reason why is because the filmmaker was so wrapped up in getting the message across that they forgot to tell a story.
Yeah.
I told somebody once, if I ever write my memoirs, one chapter is going to be called God Gave Us Imaginations. Why aren't we using them? You know what I mean? And one of the things that I couldn't get over is people on both sides of the spectrum, if you will, for Reconcile. I'm getting a little bit off on a tangent here. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
People on both sides of the tangent of the spectrum here, both believers and non-believers, have said this idea about God kidnapping people. Oh, that's not a God I want to serve. For the record, do we really believe God is doing this Reconciler program anywhere? No, this is a movie. Okay, this is a movie.
Wait, this wasn't a documentary? I'm good.
No, it's not. This is a movie. This is a story that I
based on true stories
to get across a spiritual concept of reconciliation. And the truth is, I think that this movie could have been done without the Christian message, because I think reconciliation is something we need more of. There are too many people in this world just holding on to grudges, and grudges can eat away at you like a cancer. But movies like The Sting or the Back to the Future trilogy I really like. One of my favorite films is a lesser-known work of Jim Caviezel's called Frequency. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Oh, I love Frequency. That's a good movie.
Oh, yeah, Frequency, yeah.
Yeah.
You want to know what's funny about Frequency? It is the most grounded in reality time travel movie ever made.
Yeah.
Because scientists have surmised that there's no machine that we could build that could send a human in time, but sending a radio signal through time is actually a little bit more feasible, because you would have to send if you could send a signal beyond the speed of light, you could send a radio signal through time. At least that's been I wrote a time travel script on my own a couple of years ago, and I wanted to ground it a bit more in reality. I mean, Back to the Future is awesome, but it's pure fiction.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
what?
Yes.
That's not a documentary, too?
So,
based on a true story?
I like movies that make the audience think. And I've never liked movies where the characters you're watching are dumb. It seems like every comedy that's made these days is people are entertained by watching blithering idiots. And I've never liked that. I like watching movies where it turns out the characters you were watching are smarter than you. And there's always which is one of the reasons why I wanted to end this movie, The Reconciler, with a big revelation. Now, one thing I should mention about that real quickly, the original ending of the film was not that God was the reconciler. The original ending of the film was going to be, the original ending of the play, rather, was going to be that Ed was Joe Sanford, the guy that he was talking about. And only the audience was going to know that. And in the original play, one of the mother and daughter, the characters who are now twins, had a Bible on them. And when it was revealed to the audience that Ed was the reconciler, they got out of the room. The two people that were with him said they were going to go to the police, and it was going to be Ed puts his cane down, and you hear some of the other lines that led to it, and the audience could figure out he was the reconciler. And he starts to destroy evidence in the room, and he's about to destroy the Bible, but for whatever reason, he puts it in his pocket instead, and walks off scot free, kind of like how Kaiser Soze or Jigsaw would in the the mainstream films. I ran that by a friend of mine named Al, who actually is the director of the only film I've ever been in that Shawn did not direct. A movie called Dark Disciple, which is an action-packed film. You guys should check it out. I ran that by him, and he was like, Scott, you're writing a script called The Reconciler. The Reconciler is God. Too bad you can't have God be the reconciler. And I thought about it. I'm like, well, could I? And suddenly it occurred to me, to have all this power to abduct people without them knowing and not get caught, I think that's something only God himself could pull off. And that quickly became the thing, and Ed quickly became an angel rather than Joe Sanford, the guy. I kept the Joe Sanford story to mislead the audience, because if God were really doing something like this, I think it would get wrapped up in an urban legend like something like Joe Sanford. So that's why we kept that story in.
Well, the thing I liked about doing this is that and showing these three situations, and you talked about things, people aren't like it's a murder or whatever, that some of the things seem petty. You think just about your friends who aren't talking to each other anymore, or your family members, and you're standing back going, what do you say? That's so petty. Why are they haven't talked to each other for years when it's over this stupid little thing? And I think that was one of our things of the movie, is we were hoping that people would walk away. In fact, I did. I had people that saw it that are like, in fact, we did a screening, and I've got a pastor friend of mine at a church. He showed it and he previewed it, and he got up, and when he introduced it, and at the end, or I think it was when he wrapped, he goes, I haven't talked to my son in 3 or 4 months, and this movie inspired me to call him and to try and set things right. So I think for us, even if people aren't of faith or whatever, and I think that there's that element of it that might be inspiring to just people that have issues with others, or they're like, that's really stupid. I've been keeping not talking to this or that. So hopefully our idea too is just that it could help even inspire people in society to not have these petty disagreements with each other.
Yeah, I mean, there's
John,
a lot of times where people just get arguing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Shawn, you actually reminded me of something that I remember happening on the set. And I don't know if you know the follow-up to this, because I sadly don't. But we had I forget what his name was, but we had a great set designer on this. And not everybody who worked on this film, was a Christian. It's not a requirement you be a Christian to work on a Christian film. Because sometimes Christians are not good actors. You need actors. You don't need
higher quality people. No
matter what their faith is. And then our set designer, who also actually designed the Reconciler envelopes, which were really cool. He only could make 3 copies of each one. So Jeremy and Jordan and I, we had to be careful how many times we could only do so many takes of ripping the envelope open. But anyway, hey, that's a budget. That's what you call a budget. But anyway, he had his son working on the set with him. And I told him, some of the things that inspired this. And he goes, yeah, I wish I could do this to my dad and my older brother. Because it turns out his dad and his older brother were not on speaking terms. And I ended up talking to our set designer about that. And he told me that when this film was done, he was going to send his son a copy of the movie and his own version of the letter that he had designed.
Oh, wow.
As kind of an olive branch. I don't know what happened with that or if he ever did it. He just told us that's what he was going to do. So we sadly have not kept in touch. So, but just, stuff like that kind of makes it worth it. And what this actually reminds me of something else that I think Mr. Sesame brought up during the, that you actually realized something during your podcast. You said, if it's God doing this, he would know that your apology was not genuine. If you were in this situation, you apologize, just to get out of the room. In fact, we kind of have a moment like that where Jeremy's character, Alex, goes, okay, I forgive you. Can we get out of here now? And I'm like, yeah, he's probably monitoring everything in here. I've had people, believers and non-believers, ask me, So, and even the people who criticize the film saying, so God is literally saying, make up or die. Well, if this is God we're talking about, who knows your heart, who knows your brain, who knows, he knows if you have it in you, whether or not to forgive. He's not going to put anybody in the reconciler scenarios that he knows is going to be stubborn enough that they're going to die. Okay.
Right.
So he would never, so if you're stubborn enough that you would rather die than forgive somebody, you're not going to be there in the first place. In some ways, the whole death thing is a bluff. The whole death, it's one of the reasons why, like, the reconciler leaves Ed, Alex, and James so much food, because he knows he knows how long it's going to take and stuff like that. But I mean, he wouldn't. So the saying that get out, and that's another thing that surprises me. One of the other guys, not you guys, but one of the other people who criticize this thing is, what kind of serial killer kidnaps two cops to be better policemen? Well, two things about that. Number one, that should have been a clue right there. This is not a bad guy. Number two, he doesn't kill anybody. He's not a serial. He's a serial kidnapper. He's not a serial killer. He's a serial kidnapper.
Yeah. No, I know. That's the thing too. Like when I do these like criticisms, I intentionally, I'm literal about it as almost a joke. Like I know that you didn't actually mean in the movie that like he's gonna starve these guys out or whatever. They don't style. So that's just kind of my style. Like, and I hope that people who listen to our podcast at this point know when I'm being like overly literalistic. Right. It's just like, it's my way of just like kind of goofing off a little bit. But like, who knows? Like you said, though, some people, they don't know that, so they might actually think, that.
Of the 5 people I found that have torn our film apart on YouTube, you guys were the nicest. I'll just tell you that right now.
I'm glad, because I
appreciate,
like I said before, I don't really. It's like at this point, it's just like it's almost like an exaggerated version of myself when I get into this sort of like mode. Yeah. It's like it's not really my personality. I mean, it kind of is, but it's not like 100%. So
yeah, I don't think we've been too cruel on anything except for maybe Larry the Cable Guy, just because we don't think he can act. So it's kind of
he should stick to voice creator.
Yeah, exactly.
And just to back up, on the note, I mean, a movie without peril is not a movie at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you do have to have a certain amount of, are they going to make it? Are they not going to make it? So, but yeah.
I told my pastor once, I said, you do realize that it is impossible to make a movie that does not have sin in it in any way, because if you don't have a problem to resolve, you don't have a story.
Right.
So even if you're portraying the sin as a bad thing, there's still sin in Christian movies. If people are getting over a problem, then it is impossible to make a movie that does not have sin in it in some way, because if you don't have a problem to resolve, there's no story.
Yeah, I mean, you need conflict, even if it's just the conflict within yourself or with you and God or whatever it is. It's just you need that conflict in there. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wish that some mainstream thing. I don't know why mainstream media and shows always turn the Bible readers into the serial killer or something like that. I just wish that they could. And I mean, the idea that someone's not probably going to swipe this if I mention it, the idea that brought Shawn and me together in the first place, which is actually worth mentioning, that we were actually introduced by a mutual Facebook friend. And I was trying to make this movie that involved a pair of twins, which we wound up using in Reconciler. And someone said to me, hey, you should talk to this guy, Shawn Justice, because he is a twin and he's a Christian filmmaker. He might be interested. And that's kind of what started this whole thing. And I'll never forget July 9th, 2012, when I called him and found out about his son, Caleb. Because we are wired to unfortunately think about how things affect us. Shawn and I still had not met in person at that point, actually. It's worth mentioning as well. I honestly thought my dream of doing a movie with Shawn was over at that point. And I was like, okay, little did I know that tragedy would be the very thing that would make our first film. And that's why I love the fact that Shawn, credited Caleb as the executive producer. And there have been people who have actually accused me of being overly loyal to Shawn. I've actually had people say to me, Shawn's resume is not very long. What has he done? And one of the things that I've said is, how about this? He said, Scott, I will help you, when every other big-name Christian movie producer was slamming the door in my face. That's one thing he's done right there. And secondly, when he got the money from Caleb's death and wanted to make the movie, to honor Caleb's memory, Shawn wrote at least 10 scripts before you and I met.
Oh yeah,
So,
they're still in my library.
Yeah,
And
okay, You are talented enough of a writer. He could have dumbed down or simplified any of them and made the movie to honor Caleb, but he chose my idea instead. He gave a over caffeinated, anxiety-ridden magician from Boston a chance when no one else would. So that's one of the reasons.
Loyalty is something that is rare sometimes these days. So that's always good that you guys have that between each other.
Yeah.
We wish we lived closer than 3,000 miles apart. I can tell you that.
Well, with stuff like Zoom and other things, you're closer than you ever were like years ago. So yeah.
We write very well together as well. I jokingly tell people that I'm the baker and he's the guy who decorates every script that we've ever written together, whether it was one of my ideas or one of his. It's one that I will write first and then he will finesse and make it sound not like a church play, because Shawn has told me that I'm better at story points than he is, and Shawn is way better at writing dialogue than I am. So I told my friend Al, who I mentioned earlier, I said that thing once. He goes, so basically, Scott, you make the tire and Shawn figures out how to make it turn. I'm like, I guess you could call it that. Yeah. So,
that's a good thing. One last thing before we wrap things up here. What I know you got Lucifer and the Father that just came out. Are you guys working on anything else coming up, or trying to get that as a series? Or
but that's the main thing right now. Believe it or not, one of you said that Reconciler would be better as a anthology series. Believe it or not, we actually wrote 9 episodes. We actually wrote 10 episodes of a Reconciler series.
Uh-huh.
Okay. At some point, we're hoping we have a lot of the original idea that I was telling. As a matter of fact, I just realized that I went off on one of my tangents and I never said something earlier that I wanted to. I was talking about, how the mainstream always portrays Christians as like the serial killing Bible reader or whatever. The idea that I've been trying to make with Shawn for 13 years was based on a guy who went to my church who was a great man of God, and his job was he was a private detective. And I thought, man, that is a wonderful dichotomy to explore.
Uh-huh.
And I think that would even appeal to how do you not compromise the morals of your beliefs and do that job? And that was that genesis into I'm not going to mention the title here because people have already accused me of ripping off Saw. I don't want anybody ripping us off. So. Plus, Shawn knows how long I can talk about that idea, and I've already talked a lot already, so I'm going to cut myself off right there. But to answer your question directly, yes, Lucifer and the Father is clear and present. It's what as far as stuff that we're doing together. Shawn and I have other projects independently. I'm going to a Comic-Con this weekend with my Mario group, and Shawn is always doing this corporate video stuff. And like I said, he wrote 9 scripts before we ever met, so I never know. I never know what shiny object he's chasing after next. So,
Lucifer and the Father is. I mean, it was in the middle of COVID, and Scott was like, I just wanted to do something, and and so he was able to, do the crowdfund and pulled that together, and he and Bob flew out to. Central Oregon, where I have a second home out there, where I spend a lot of the summers out there. And I knew the locations. Originally, the script was 2 guys sitting at a table talking, and I'm like, well, why don't we, use some of the locations, and incorporate those into the story.
Perfect example of him finessing my script and improvement.
I mean, it was beautiful locations.
It was a lot of fun.
Now, Lucifer and the Father, I'm willing to admit, is kind of a ripoff. Okay, I was watching Heat, and the diner scene between Pacino and De Niro. I said, "Man, this has been done with Professor X and Magneto, and I'm surprised no one's ever done it with God and the Devil." I'm like, "Wait a minute,
that's cool."
And that was kind of about. So it was inspired by the scene in Heat or whatever. And one of the reasons why I pitched it to Bob and Shawn is because. Bob, I'm sure you guys recognize Bob, who played the role of God in Lucifer and the Father, is the same guy who played Detective Tilton in The Reconciler. He had been wanting to work with us again since that, but we never had Shawn or I had a project that I wanted to do that was based on the first 4 chapters of Genesis, where I wanted him to play God and me to play Satan. And Shawn always loves to film things in the Oregon area. So I was kind of like, okay, what can we do during COVID that would have a small group of people that wouldn't violate any of the parameters? And I remembered this skit that I wrote based on the scene from Heat. And I said, what if we do this? And I said, Bob, it's not the big movie that I promised you, but at least we get to work together once and as God and the devil, like we said, and you get to work with Shawn again. And Shawn, you get to shoot the area you love. So it was a win-win. And the most ironic thing is by the time we got the thing crowdfunded and got to the area, half the COVID rules that we were trying to avoid didn't exist anymore.
Yeah. So we ended up, my wife got involved in writing that. She's been my production designer on a couple of films since. And she's really good at we work well together. And so that's when we made it. And the whole idea that I incorporated into the story then was how in the New Testament, how there's the temptation of Jesus by Satan, and he takes him to different places, like on top of the temple, here or there. And I thought, wouldn't it be kind of fun to incorporate that kind of element into the story where instead it's the reverse, God's taking Satan to different locations, kind of throwing him for a loop. But there's a lot of, ultimately we wanted to just communicate God's heart and to really show, people are like, oh, praise Satan and that. It's like, you might want to re-examine that idea a little bit.
Someone's always a critic. Someone's always a critic.
Yeah.
Again, with using your imagination, just real quickly, we had one person leave a comment on the YouTube video say, oh, roly-poly guys like this, no, my God would never look like that. Satan was the most beautiful angel in heaven. And I'm like, oh, brother. And I'm like, let me ask both of you a question. You both watch Lucifer and the Father, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you really think we're trying to say we believe God and the devil look like me and Bob?
No.
No, it's just
Of course not.
It's a depiction.
Of course not. We reduced them to a human level that our puny minds can understand.
And beauty's in the eye of the beholder anyway. So
yes, exactly. So, or at least in the scenery there.
Yeah.
That was, we talk about time travel. That would have been that for the past 5,000 years. Nobody knew what the devil or God looked like until the Lucifer and the Father came out. Like, what?
You guys figured it out.
No.
I didn't want to do a spotlight. I didn't want to do a spotlight talking like Charlton Heston out of the sky, talking to a guy.
What is this Lucifer and the Father film?
Right.
This is what God and Satan look like.
Well, anyways, we're running out of time here, so I just thought I'd let you guys go here, and thank you very much for your time. If you ever want to come back on again to talk about anything, the door's always open. Just
thanks,
hit us
guys.
Up. All right.
Appreciate it.
Oh, you guys have a good night, and thank you.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much.
I just saw a warning came up less than a minute on the thing, so I didn't want to start another chat.
I understand.
Plus, I have to use the restroom really quick. So, okay. So, alrighty.
Recording stopped.
Thank you guys very much.
Bye. Thanks a lot, man.
Bye.
All right. Take care, guys.
Okay. Thank you for listening to that interview there with Scott and Shawn about the film, The Reconciler, and their other work, including their upcoming series that they're trying to get done that has a short film right now called Lucifer and the Father. One thing you can do to check out more about them, the best place right now is to go to justicepictures.com/films. It's the best place to get any information about Justice Pictures. And yes, as we said in the interview, Shawn Justice is his real name.
Yes, his real name. And also consider donating to the project if you feel inspired to do so. Because like Scott said before in this interview and also in other interviews he's done with other people, when they're asking for money, they're not asking for one person to pony up all of the money. It's a group effort. So if you can only contribute $1, that's better than no dollars.
It's $1 closer to their goal. I mean, it's, and I mean, just think about that when you're trying to donate and help out any kind of smaller artist or a charity or anything like that. Like if you only have $1 and you're like, hey, I need something to do with this, maybe help out, some independent artist or donate it to a charity that's going to help the world in some way, and it'll come back to you, things pay forward in some way.
And
yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. It might not be the exact way that you hope for or think, but
it might even just be knowing that you helped somebody.
That could be it.
That's a good thing too, and on the Christian aspect of this, it's what God would want you to do, I guess. So, any other thoughts here before we wrap things up, Sesame?
No, just hope you enjoyed it. I did.
Yeah, me too. And I'd like to thank Scott and Shawn again for being on the show. And like I said, you can check them out at justicepictures.com/films. You can check us out at all2reeltoo.com. Find all of our links and everything there. Be sure to subscribe to the show and give us a 5-star review wherever you can, or a lower review. I don't care, whatever you're feeling. But just like money, every review helps. So,
it does. No, it does actually.
And share the show. That doesn't even cost anything. Just share a link to this. I mean, and share a link to their project too. It's easy to do. Just share it on social media.
Yeah. I shared Lucifer and the Father.
Yeah.
My fake earlier,
and I will later. I haven't yet because I was waiting until after this comes out. But yeah, do it. And be good to each other. Recycle. Be good to animals.
Mm-hmm.
Be good to the environment. And remember that I love you and Sesame loves you. And until next time, bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to All2ReelToo podcast, a Cullen Park production. Produced and edited by Michael E. Cullen II. Music by Matthew Hawes. Subscribe and share the show. Visit us at cullenpark.com.